Welcome to Turning Hard Times to Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, speaking to you from New York City on the 12th day of November, 2019. I like to always remind you that I'm the editor of Jay Taylor's Gold, Energy, and Tech Stocks. You can subscribe to that by going to miningstocks.com, or you can call our office here in New York during normal business hours, 718-457-1426. I want to thank each of you for listening to this show, making it one of the more popular shows on the Voice America Business Channel, and I also want to invite each of you to keep your questions and comments, whatever comments you might have about the show, keep them coming to questionsfortaylor@gmail.com. Questions, the number 4, Taylor@gmail.com. Do want to thank our sponsors for making this show economically viable. Our sponsors for today's show: Irving Resources, Novo Resources, Great Bear Resources, Gatling Exploration, and TriStar Gold Resources. I've titled today's show, Profiting from Delusional Central Bankers. John Rubino, Eric Coffin. John Rubino and Eric Coffin return, and Nick Appleyard visits for the first time. The world has bought the Keynesian notion that earthly paradise can be engineered by excessive consumption, zero savings, and debt-based money creation magically out of thin air by central bankers. In the process of creating trillions upon trillions of debt-based dollars, the global dollar-based financial system is becoming ever more risky. Debt has been growing ever more rapidly than income, making it impossible for central bankers to enable normalization of their balance sheets and a return to market-driven interest rates, which in effect provides efficient price allocation of capital. Now, the central bankers are caught up in a web of destruction that is their own doing. Of course, this is a message that is not widely told, because if Wall Street conveyed that message, it would lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy sooner rather than later. So, for example, Peter Schiff, who had been previously a regular guest on CNBC, is no longer welcome there because he was suggesting that people should sell their stocks and buy gold. Well, that's not a very profitable trade for Wall Street, so Peter is no longer seen on CNBC. But that doesn't mean Wall Street and central bankers can defy the laws of nature and nature's markets forever. And that is the point of the topic of today's show. If the mainstream would rather hide the truth from the public for the purpose of short-term gain, then smart investors, the likes of Ray Dalio and others, who think for themselves and can and do profit from recognizing truth over propaganda, then there are opportunities for sure. Of course, when it comes to investing, timing is everything, which is why we usually have Michael Oliver on this show at this hour. Michael will be with us only every other Tuesday now from here on, because his workload is just simply precluding him from being with us all the time. But I can tell you that based on his momentum work, a gold price of around $1,415 at the end of the month would cause him some concern from a bullish point of view. As this show began today, gold was trading at about $1,458, and the stock market was continuing to rise once again today. John Rubino will be with me in the second half of today's show to provide his insights into the underlying dynamics of key markets and how he thinks we can not only avoid being victimized by existing monetary policy, but possibly profit from it. And right after our first commercial break, I will be talking to Nick Appleyard. He is the president and CEO of TriStar Gold Resources. That's a new sponsor to this show, and it's also a company with an advanced stage gold project in Brazil with very robust economics. TriStar is a company that I have recently began covering in my newsletter, and as I have just also, TriStar will also be joining me this weekend, that's Friday and Saturday, at the Metals Investor Forum. I hope that we will see some of you there. Speaking of the Metals Investor Forum, I'm really happy to tell you that Eric Coffin, the co-founder of that institution, is with me right now. Eric writes an excellent newsletter that covers exploration stocks, and he is as good as anyone I know in explaining complicated geological concepts in a way that investors without much background in geology can understand. I recommend it highly that those of you listening to this show consider signing up for Eric's letter. You should go to hraadvisory.com, hraadvisory.com, to sign up for Eric Coffin's Hard Rock Advisories. So thanks for joining me, Eric. It's good to have you with me again.
Always happy to talk to you, Jay.
It's always good to have you, and I must say that I always enjoy your talks at the Metals Investor Forum, and thanks for you and Scott Gibson for setting up this excellent forum. It is something that I really enjoy going to and meeting a lot of good stories and a lot of good companies there. You'll be bringing some of them, and maybe you could just talk to us a little bit about a couple of the companies that you're going to be inviting that that are kind of favorites of yours at this time, I gather. I think the first one is Vizsla Resources. Vizsla Resources is one you're talking about. VZLA is a symbol.
Yeah, Vizsla, I started following in the newsletter, I don't know, about a month and a half ago. I owned it on the recommendation of a young broker I know. But they were, when I bought it, it was clearly a company in search of a deal. And they found one in an agreement to acquire essentially an entire silver mine in camp in Mexico, including an operating silver mine. That's a 6-year deal. It's not a cheap one. But the way the deal is structured, essentially they have the first 2 years relatively cheaply. They plan to hit this pretty hard. Their stated goal is pretty plain. They want to prove up high-grade silver gold resources. I like the fact that they've got the entire district. I like the fact that they've recently reported several chutes that they've sampled with kilo plus silver equivalent grades, and those silver equivalents are just silver and gold. It's not including base metals. There's very little base metals. They're very high in the system, which again is something I want to see. Almost none of this camp has ever been drilled by anyone. Silverstone Resources, which was a Capstone subsidiary, did a bit of work about 10 years ago, was in and out of there. But essentially the vendors, it's 2 Mexican groups, one of which is operating a 500-ton-a-day mining operation. And if they ultimately buy 100% of the camp, they will be buying the mining operation, the tailings, the power, the mining licenses, the HEDO agreements, everything. But for now, this is essentially a high-grade silver drill discovery story in a nutshell.
Right, and so I see it's selling at about 46.5 cents in Canadian money, only 33.6 million shares out, though. So
yeah,
market cap,
and the insiders, I think, have got something like 25-30%, I think. You will see, there will be a financing announcement between now and NIF, which is only 3 days away. I'm quite certain of that. I mean, their stated intention was to do a large financing. There's been no secret about that. My understanding from people that I've talked to is there are several fairly large names in terms of institutional investors, et cetera, that have already put their hands up. I don't think these guys will have a lot of trouble raising $5 million plus at current prices, and they've said repeatedly to me that their intent is to do a no warrant financing. So I expect to see a news release on that in the next couple of days, I think.
They have not yet announced the raise?
They haven't announced it, but it's no secret. Everyone knows they're going to announce the financing. I mean, it's
okay. Well, I mean, the stock is performing pretty well today. I think it's up 8 cents or something like that. So it's a big move percentage-wise today already, and if the market knows it. Anyway, that's very interesting, Eric. Thanks for that. And another one that you're bringing to the Metals Investor Forum, Pan Global. They have a VMS project in the Iberian Pyrite Belt in Spain. I know I'm following a company that has something in Portugal on that same belt, but talk to us about Pan Global.
Pan Global, I started following because I like the management group. It's very senior technical guys. Tim Moody, who runs it, was a very senior corporate development guy at Rio Tinto before he retired. He's got 2 main project sets, I guess, in this. They're both in Spain. One of them is called Escacena. That's one where he just delivered what I would describe as discovery holes, about 20 meters of 1.5% copper. It's right smack in the middle of the Iberian Pyrite Belt. He picked up this project because it's got a couple of large gravity anomalies on it. And if you look at the last, 6, 8, 10 discoveries in the Pyrite Belt in Spain, essentially all of them came from companies drilling gravity anomalies. This survey was done back in the 80s by Exxon. Exxon stuck around for a year or so, drilled a few holes, and then, like a lot of oil companies at the time, decided they didn't really want to be in the hard rock business and moved on. It was held privately for quite a while until Tim picked it up. He's also more recently, as in last week, acquired the adjoining project, which has another 3 or 4 gravity anomalies on it. But what I like about this is he's finally managed to get in there. He did a little bit of drilling. In large part, he did that in order to get core, to get density measurements and stuff, because there's no old core or anything on this property. That allowed him to refilter the gravity surveys. But while he was doing that, he also did downhole EM surveys, which are another common tool to discover VMS deposits. He's got a couple of really, really nice EM off-hole conductors. One of those he clipped the edge of, and that was his discovery hole. I expect he's going to be back in there in a month or two with the next drill phase, and I think the odds of him pulling more good holes are quite good. And the thing with the Pyrite Belt is it's kind of the land of the giants when it comes to VMS deposits. The one that's adjacent to him to the east is about 80 million tons. Another that's about 10 kilometers to the west is about 80 million tons. That's big for a VMS deposit, but that's the kind of deposit you find in the Pyrite Belt. That's why the majors like it so much.
Yeah, and so what minerals are we looking at here primarily? Base metals, of course, and
primarily be copper. Some of the Pyrite Belt deposits in Portugal, actually, a couple of them, notably Neves Corvo, which is arguably the best deposit in the whole belt in Portugal. That's being mined by Lundin Mining. That one also has a couple of tin zones in it where there's up to 1% or 2 tin along with the copper. I don't think anybody really knows why, but one interesting thing about this discovery hole, if you will, is that there were a couple of sections in it that actually had up to 1% tin. I have no idea what the tin's doing there, but it's a nice thing to find if you can find it, because the stuff sells for about 3 times what copper does, so it's a nice add-on. But it's primarily copper. There's probably some zinc, lead in there, mainly zinc in there someplace. Most of these zones, there's usually copper-rich zones and zinc-rich zones. Hopefully there'll be some precious metals along with them as well.
All right, well, speaking of precious metals, with just a couple of minutes left here, one of your favorites and one of mine, Great Bear. What are your thoughts on Great Bear right now? I mean, the stock has taken quite a hit recently from its highs, but it seems to be happening in spite of the fact that the good news just keeps coming with every drill, every press release, it seems.
It's a very impressive company at a lot of levels. Very good share structure, lots of cash, but they have lots more cash. They're doing I think it's an 825 flow-through issue right now, a bought deal. That'll bring them up to about 30 million in cash, 10 million or give or take in the money warrants. They've got 3 main areas on their Dixie project in Red Lake. The areas they started out on initially focused on Hinge and Limb. Those are kind of classic high-grade quartz carbonate veins, kind of standard issue for Red Lake. What they're working on now is quite different. I don't think they've really classified it at all. It's what's called the LP zone, which is it's a large zone of high-grade and disseminated gold in sulfides in the host rock. It's not vein hosted. It's just sulfide hosted in the rock. I'm not sure even I'm not even sure what the comparable would be in terms of scale potential and what the holes look like. It does bear some similarities to both Hemlo and Canadian Malartic. Both of those are obviously well-known, very large gold mines. I think really the reason why you've seen the stock pull back is, one, it did get ahead of itself a bit because people got pretty excited when they started reporting this LP stuff. There was a bunch of selling from McEwen Mining, which was one of the larger shareholders. My personal opinion is McEwen Mining simply needed the money. I don't think there's anything more complicated than that. They took profits, fair enough. I think Rob McEwen has taken some profits as well. Again, fair enough. The guy's up several 100%. I think people got a little bit spooked by that, but I just think it's sort of a tempest in a teapot, and the market will work as long as they keep delivering the kind of drill holes they've been putting out for the last 2 months. I think the market will just work through it, and it's not a stock I'm concerned about, that's for sure.
Yeah, me too. That's exactly my feelings, Eric. Well, I wish we had a bit more time, as Lion One Mines is one I really wanted to ask you about, but we are out of time. We'll have to have you back on again sometime soon. There's so many names. I mean, somebody, I think it was Brent Cook, that said nobody knows more people and more deals than than Eric Coffin up there in Vancouver. So thanks so much for being with us, Eric, and look forward to seeing you in a couple of days up there in Vancouver. All the best to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jay. Thanks for having me on.
All right.